Welcome to the CROC Podcast.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here is your host, Dr. E.
Howdy, CROC Nation. Dr. Tom Eanelli here with you with another amazing CROC podcast. Along with me at my side, as always, my Robin to my Batman, my Spider-Man to your Superman, my valet, my best bud, my spiritual warrior, Angel Santana. Have faith, let it begin. Angel, happy weekend.
Happy weekend indeed. I see you're sporting the Mets hat. I feel like I should have worn a Met hat. I'd like to welcome everybody to Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer. We are excited to have you as we are continuing on our new season, and remind you that anytime, at any point you want to reach out to us, do it via social media. And guess what? It's going to go right to Dr. E. It's going to go right to me, and we will answer you. And remind me, Dr. E, about how they can get a copy of that free book that we just bought. And I'm not going to say what it is until the very end of today's show. Go for it, buddy.
Excellent. I'm also excited. I love doing, a podcast module, and we're right in the middle of a 3-part module on survivor thriver side effects from their cancer treatments. The first one was 2 weeks ago, and we basically talked about the 8% rule, which in essence is 8 survivor thrivers out of 100 will get some kind of a side effect from their treatment, either from their surgery, from their chemotherapy, from their immunotherapy, from their targeted therapy, or from their radiation. And it's how we're framing that. We're framing it in 3 distinct ways. One generally that we did last week, just talk about the nuts and bolts of it. This week, we're going to be talking about side effects from the perspective of a survivor thriver. And next week, we're going to be talking about side effects from the perspective of a provider. So I'm really excited. There's 2 survivor thrivers that I'm basically was very inspired to the point that they gave me the idea to do this module. And it's not an easy module to do, Angel, because it's a provider basically peeling back the curtain to let everyone know that we know that 8 people out of 100 will get side effects even if we do everything perfectly. And I think you enjoyed the last podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
I did, and I'm looking forward to asking more questions and really just diving into this new module. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is I'm going to start with just going over the 2 controversial premises that we're making in regard to side effects from cancer treatments, and they seem paradoxical. They seem, inconsistent, but I'm going to say them anyway, and I hope to prove by the end of next time's podcast to prove these premises correct. So the first premise is that providers connect. So the doctors and nurses and healthcare people connect on a deeper plane with a survivor thriver in the belly of the beast of this side effect of we call it morbidity as the fancy word, and actually even more so than when we cure a patient. And I find that to be, at least all the physicians that I've met in my career, which are numerous, the best of them have a great deal of humility. So rather than be braggarts and say, oh, I've cured 800 of these kind of patients, or I've cured this and I've cured that, and I remember every cure, I think we're more humble. And I think that at least the doctors that I've met that are worth their salt really don't remember the cures, but they certainly remember the side effects. Because remember, out of these 8 people out of 100, these side effects come directly from our hand. They're not side effects that were related to a medication or related to, it's actually from us. It's 100% from your doctors. So that is a very humbling statistic. And we're going to get a little deeper and talk about it from the perspective of the survivor thriver. The second controversial premise is ensuring that the proper preparation of the survivor thriver by means of checks and balances, meaning trying to minimize side effects that could be avoided by having peer review and getting a bunch of people to look at your case and to make sure that you're flying straight, as well as early intervention and recognition. And basically, it can be a game changer our relationship can become a positive one, even in the face of side effects, rather than a negative or adversarial one, as long as you do it correctly. And if I was to just do a distillation of this basic concept, so the concept of breaking it down into its most elemental illustration, our survivor thrivers who suffer these side effects from our hands make us better doctors, and they make us better humans. And I really want that to be the premise that we go on when we're talking about the subject. So the starting point for all side effects, believe it or not, is miles downstream from the actual treatment. So actually, side effects start from the minute a patient walks into the room for the first time and meets their doctor for a consultation. That first meeting is when this all starts. And we have to be very cognizant of how we're going to handle this, because we have to be thinking 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. We have to have that first and foremost, besides a cure, which should be simultaneous in our minds, not more important and not less important. And it's this space, Angel, this space and time that mean the difference between a great treatment experience and a nightmare for both the survivor thriver as well as for the physician or the care team. So there are challenges in this space and time, and they are multiple. So let's go through them quickly. So first thing is, if you think about that first meeting, the survivor thriver is invariably overwhelmed. I see about 90% of my patients, or my survivor thrivers, have questions about side effects that they write in their little notepad that they bring into their appointment for their consultation. But they're so overwhelmed with their diagnosis, they're so overwhelmed and fixated on life and death, that the side effect discussion becomes a secondary event. Instead of becoming primary event part B, it really becomes a secondary event. And they're very easily redirected if a physician is not comfortable talking about side effects, or a physician wants to downplay these side effects. We can easily maneuver around the patient because of the fact that they're overwhelmed. And we can't let that happen. We can't go down the easy road or the easy path. We have to take the hard path, because whatever we do in that first appointment will come up in the future, especially in those 8% of patients who suffer from side effects. So it's the side effect discussion that has to be absorbed by our survivor thriver and not forgotten. And we have to always remember rule number one: a cure without quality of life is no victory. And we've talked about that many times on the podcast. And we now are doing a module specifically about that. The second challenge is in the process of getting informed consent. So informed consent is a legal document where a physician is basically charged with the duty of not only going through every potential side effect, whether they've seen the side effect ever in their careers or not, but also to go over all alternatives of care. And if this is not done perfectly, it could either A, underprepare a patient for the rigors of treatment, or B, destroy their spirit. And doctors are famous for downplaying the obvious, basically telling patients this is not going to hurt, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. We also underexplain. We take the overwhelmed spirit of the survivor thriver, and we basically use that as an excuse to get in and out of the room as quickly as we can without getting deep and without explaining anything. And then when we are pushed to explain things, we hide behind our medical jargon and we become incomprehensible. So I call the informed consent session, which happens during that first meeting, as a Goldilocks analogy. So Goldilocks went into the house. There was porridge that was too hot, there was porridge that was too cold, and there was porridge that was just right. So I start with the 8% rule. I actually go through this, and this method is derived from 35 years of experience, and my obsessive compulsive disorder plays perfectly into this, because once I have all my blocks lined up, like a kid lining up blocks, that have to be all perfectly straight and all the colors together, that has helped me to, I think, be able to say that our informed consent in our clinic is quite good. The first thing I talk about is that 8% rule. 8% of patients through by our hand, even if we do everything perfectly, will get a side effect. However, most of those patients, they will self-resolve in a short amount of time. 4% of the 100 patients, survivor thrivers, may have lifelong side effects, but they will be mild. And 2% might have lifelong side effects that are severe. And then you will have to also look at some of the higher risk patients who are either coming back for a second series of treatments after the first series didn't work. They're at much higher risk of having a severe side effect. So that 8% rule might go up to 20%. Also, you have to be able to go through, and this is what I do after I go through the 8% rule, is I talk about the grades of side effects. So we go through grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, with grade 4 being death, grade 1 being mild. Then we go through everything very, very, thoroughly to make sure the patient has a good basis for the concept of side effects. So we talk about cure, of course, but we also talk about side effects. And the third thing I do is I make sure that there are no guarantees given. I talk about my confidence in the case. I talk about my expectations and my intentions. However, they must make sure that their expectations are appropriate for their situation. And then I furthermore break everything down into the acute versus the chronic. So these are side effects that happen during radiation. These are then the side effects that can happen months and months down the road. A lot of people don't even know. They might wake up one day and they might be peeing blood and they might think, oh my God, I'm dying, when all they have is some radiation cystitis and then I get the call, oh my God, I'm dying. And it's like, no, you're not dying. You have some radiation cystitis. And they'll say, but it's 6 months I had the radiation, or a year that I had the radiation. That means that patient was not properly educated as it relates to side effects. So basically, then I break things down to site specificity. So again, a person that I'm treating for a skin cancer on the ear is going to have different set of side effects than someone that I'm treating for a tonsillar cancer that's going to have a different set of side effects as related to a lung cancer, or to a colon cancer, or to a prostate cancer, or to a GYN cancer, or to a sarcoma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to make sure that all of your side effects are appropriate to the site. Then what I do is I go into my personal experience, and what I would advise my brethren, my fellow physicians, is to talk about their experiences with patients and the side effects that you have seen in relation to oranges and apples to apples, not patients that are not relatable, but related, and say, hey, I've treated 1,000 patients with prostate cancer. I've never seen this, or I've never seen that, but I do see a lot of this and I do see a lot of that. I also would encourage our practitioners to do what's called outcome analyses. It's a really good quality, exercise where you basically look at all of your prostate cancer patients, all of your breast cancer patients, and you look at all of them and you look at how many of them you've seen, how many you've treated, how many have survived, how many have had side effects, and what those side effects are. And then you could really talk to your survivor thrivers with expertise and with experience, because you're able to delineate what your experience is and how your outcomes are, as opposed to, the 8% rule, which is just a gross number that's just kind of thought out. It's a good number, but it's not really based in science. And then lastly, please use your common sense. Don't be a knucklehead. Don't be detached from your patient. Don't be not focused. Don't have one foot out the door. Don't just say really brash things and scare the living daylights out of your patients. Use your common sense. For instance, if I see a woman who's really freaked out about the potential for heart damage for breast radiation and they have right-sided breast cancer, I'm going to reassure them that they're going to do great and their heart will be fine because the heart is on the left side. And how many patients that have been afraid of getting paralyzed from radiation after lung cancer, and I show them the portal and I show them here's the tumor in the periphery of the lung, here's the spinal cord, we're not anywhere near the spinal cord. Will spinal cord injury be in the informed consent? Of course it will, because that's the law. Will you become paralyzed? Of course you will not. Iodine, I have to tell every single patient, whether they're 20 years old or 40 years old or 100 years old, that there's a potential for creation of a second cancer from taking a radioactive iodine pill. I've done thousands of iodine pills and I've never seen a second cancer. So can I not put, you can get a cancer on the informed consent? I can't do that, but I can tell them that I've never seen one and they're not going to be the first. So again, you use your common sense. So you talk about the acute side effects, long-term side effects, the site-specific side effects, your personal experiences, your outcome analyses, and your common sense approach to make it not too hot, not too cold, but just right. And I think that we've perfected it, at least in our clinic, when we have our head and neck cancer patients. And I've talked about this before, Angel, where, I am a very upbeat and positive, oncologist. We did a podcast about my optimistic approach to cancer and how I have a guarded optimism in all cases, whether it's a stage 4 or stage 1. But at the same time, when it comes to something that's going to be difficult, like a head and neck case or an anal case, I basically take off my hat as being, the cheerleader, and I really know that it's my job to prepare these people properly. And it goes from telling them that they're talking and they're tasting and their speech and their swallowing and the pain that's related and all their secretions, the dehydration, the malnutrition, and I break them down and then I build them back up. And how I build them back up, Angel, is that I'm preparing them for the worst, hoping for the best. And then when I give them a timeline, then I'm building them back up. So I say, here's what's going to happen in weeks 1 and 2. Here's what's going to happen in weeks 2 to 5. Here's what's going to happen in weeks 5 to 7. In weeks 5 to 7, you might need a treatment break. You might get admitted to the hospital. You might have tremendous weight loss. You might have malnutrition. You might be dehydrated, but we're going to take care of you. Either it's from, we're going to give you infusions or we're going to put a peg tube in, and then you're going to finish. I promise you will get through this. And then 1 month when you come back to see me, you're going to be feeling awful, but you're not going to be feeling as awful as you did when you were going through treatments. In months 2 to 6, you're going to start feeling better and better every day. It's going to be a very slow process. And then months 6 through 9 and months 9 through 12. And then I tell them that the best thing I could tell them, I said, in my experience, after treating hundreds of you guys, I've noticed that when I ask the question, Joe, Amy, Delilah, whoever, you're 1 year out of treatment. Remember who you were before this started and tell me what percentage of you are you now? So Delilah, say you were 100% a month before your cancer diagnosis, and then you went down to maybe 10%, during treatment. Now you're a year out. What percentage are you back to normal? And they tell me 75 to 80% back to normal. And when I tell the patients this way before the first rad is given, the first beam is pointed, the first chemo is infused, they already are ready for the worst, prepared for the worst, hoping for the best. They know the timelines, they know the side effects, they know the acute side effects, they know the chronic side effects, they know the numbers, they know the percentages, and they pretty much know every step of the way. And in those instances, we're able to change a negative dynamic and make it into a positive dynamic. And it's basically breaking them down and then bringing them up and building them back up. Because during treatments, as I said, there's the breaks, the weight loss, the admissions, the hydrations, but at the same time, they know that 1 year, Dr. E told them that they'll be 75, at least 75 or 80% back to normal. And that is amazing. And basically, I guess the take home message for our providers is the perspective of side effects from the survivor thriver. Living life with significant side effects with dignity and courage is the greatest lesson and the greatest inspiration and motivation to make us better, to make us really good at managing side effects, preventing side effects, and then being able to relate to our patients with side effects and to be able to look them in their eye, even though we're the ones that cause those side effects, because that is just right now the primitive nature of what we do. Perhaps 10 years from now, or whenever I'm about to hang up my spikes, maybe it'll be a little bit more sophisticated, but currently this is what we're working with, and they have to be aware of that. And I'm going to end with two amazing patients, survivor thrivers, that really inspired this whole module. I'm going to call one Ernest, I'm going to call one Sue. So Ernest is a beautiful man. He passed away last week. Just again, one of the people that inspired me for this module. He had a devoted and amazing wife, devoted, amazing children. He loved sports. He was a college coach, and he and I became fast friends. He got prostate cancer, then he got a recurrence. He had radiation and then required retreatment. He ended up with inflammation and some bleeding from the rectum and damage to the rectum from the radiation. And he went through countless transfusions, but he showed so much courage. And when all of his doctors tried to talk him into a colostomy, he said, "No way, I'm going to deal with this. You have to help me deal with this." So we thought outside of the box. We got him some hyperbaric oxygen that contained the bleeding, and he ended up doing fine. Certainly every day was tough for him, but he ended up dying not of his prostate cancer and not from the side effects. He died of something unrelated. He died of heart disease. Sue, lover of life, great mom. She comes in to see me with her son. They have such a beautiful relationship. She presented with a very aggressive lung cancer that entwined itself around her esophagus. She got very aggressive chemoradiation therapy that killed the cancer, that caused what's called a fistula. Fistula is an opening between the trachea and the esophagus. So it caused her, every time she would drink or eat something, it would aspirate into her lung and she would get pneumonia. So she forced us to become great, forced us to utilize our resources in the city, some of the big tertiary care centers. She got stented. She got parenteral nourishment, meaning she got nourishment through the vein. Despite her loss of weight, despite her weakness and her chronic illness, she shows every day the same courage that Ernest showed, and she never gave up. We referred her to a tertiary care center, and she made the best of it, and the most experiments, the most experienced team to mitigate these side effects so she could live as normal life as she can. And I think, Angel, in conclusion, Ernest and Sue are two representatives of many, many, many survivor thrivers that we come in contact with on a daily basis, and we all meet during our careers. And both of these cases, in all of these cases, in most instances, they're cured of their cancer. In all instances, all of these patients, these survivor thrivers, struggle with these severe treatment-related side effects. In all of these cases, they show great courage and great will and refusal to give up. Both of these and all of these patients inspire all of their medical teams to become better, to become innovative, to think outside of the box, to collaborate and communicate with every possible resource and source of talent to solve these difficult problems. And both and all become more than patients. They become more than just survivor thrivers. They become our teachers, Angel. They become our motivators, and they become our friends. So next week, we're going to now switch the lens and look at these side effects from the perspective of the provider. Angel Santana, your thoughts about today's podcast?
I mean, I put it into three letters. I felt like we did something called CCU, and I'm not talking in medical terms, and that is communication and knowing who your doctor is, right? So you're communicating, and then on top of that, you're giving yourself the opportunity to get more information from your doctor and your family. If you don't do those two things, it's difficult. So I want to stop real quick. You provided these patients, as you stated, with every single thing that they knew was going to happen. What was the first reaction, or what would you say is the first reaction? Because that's a lot of material to take in when you already know that you've been diagnosed.
So that's where the art comes in, Angel, and thank you for that great question. So, you know, I think that it's our job, it's the physician's job when you first meet a patient is to find a way to find a common language with your survivor thriver in order to not scare them, but also not lie to them or not underplay the difficulty as it relates to some of these cancers. In Ernest's case, having retreatment for a failure that put him then in that group of patients that we talked about, the 8%, the 4%, and the 2%, it put him into that 2% of patients that have lifelong side effects that are going to be severe. Same with Sue. She had an aggressive lung cancer that basically was wrapping itself around the esophagus. And for us to cure that cancer, it caused a side effect to her esophagus. Now, sadly, these are the 2% patients, and these were the two patients that inspired me for this podcast. But more than anything, we will see patients in the 8% of patients that will have side effects that will resolve, and usually resolve very quickly, and usually resolve without any intervention. But I think the take-home message from today is going to be for our patients, for our survivor thrivers, to always be transparent, always be honest, and always be forthcoming, and always be very, what would you say, prepared, and have, when you're getting patted on the back and everything is great and there's a cure, keep a bit of reserve, knowing that your modality might cause pain down the line. And it's very important that we keep this humility, and we keep this knowledge, and we keep this necessity to remind our survivor thrivers that, this is a lifelong relationship between your doctors and you. This is a lifelong responsibility that your doctors have to take care of you, because even though our primary objective is to keep surveillance to make sure that the cancer hasn't returned, it's also our responsibility to always keep our eye out and our ears out for potential long-term side effects from these treatments. So I think that's a kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope it did answer your question.
It did. And I would say that this is the way I would break it down. So I said CCU. It's communication, it's contact. You want to keep in contact with your doctor and your family. And you have to keep understanding, you have to keep yourself in the understanding of knowing what is your surrounding. So that's what my take is from this episode. It's the CCU: contact, communication, and understanding.
Awesome. Angel, thank you so much for your comments, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you do and all that you give to this podcast and to our organization. To conclude today's podcast, it's very simple. I am so humbled, and I am so grateful to be part of your care team, to all of our survivor thrivers who come to our clinic, and I'm sure I'm speaking for all of my colleagues. We are so grateful for your trust. We are so grateful for your belief. We are so grateful for your friendship. And I want you to know that we will never leave your side, whether you have a side effect that goes away or you have a side effect that doesn't go away. We're here for you. And we will try to be worthy of that trust and that friendship that you bestow on us by our acts of trying to keep you well and keep you symptom free. And in closing, we're going to do our CROC blessing as we do each week. And that's by offering all of our patients the following. We wish you all a long, healthy, happy, and cancer-free life. God bless you. God be with you. Peace.
Hey, CROC Nation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to your friends. Visit our website, crocvip.com. We would love to hear your feedback.